FreeMMOStation.com.
What's going on, Free MMO Station? I'm Skyline Shore, and this is going to be my first impression review, or little first impression, whatever. It's not really a full review. I want to, just clarify that, guys. I have not played the full game. I literally have played it for in between 30 minutes and an hour. Got to play a little bit with some classes. Mainly, though, I mainly played with the Summoner and the Lyn archetype, or the race. But anyways, it's just a first impression, look. It's basically my opinion. It's completely opinion. Okay, so I'm just going to talk at you faces, and we're going to see how this game might fare for you, for the players here. That's our audience, which generally happens to be European, American, generally it's Western, okay? So this is going to be the Blade and Soul for the Western version of Blade and Soul. I don't know about the niche differences that make it different, other than localization with some language, but overall, I see that the game is pretty much how I envisioned it. I know a lot of people are probably imagining it something like a World of Warcraft with Kung Fu, but it's actually... It's not, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there's some things that we need to clarify, okay? So it is an MMO, but it's not a truly open world MMO. Like, there are a ton of invisible walls, okay? So with that in mind, do know that it's going to play more like an online action RPG, okay? So in the East, there's a lot of MMOs, okay? Quotation or bunny ears, MMOs. That, like Dragon Nest, Vindictus. These, if they were created in the West, maybe we would classify them as online action RPGs. However, this was sort of marketed as an MMO, and it definitely is an open world game. Well, sort of open world. I mean, it's open in the fact that you do play with other players, not just in towns, but it is not completely open world like we would expect in World of Warcraft. It's more something similar to TERA, actually. And in fact, even though the combat is a little bit different, and the art style is a little bit different, overall, there's many mechanics, many systems in Blade and Soul that actually remind me very much of TERA. So, the questing overall, much better than TERA, absolutely. Holy crap, yes. But, yes, lots of invisible walls. It's not completely open world like World of Warcraft. You're not going to be flying around everywhere. And at the same time, it's not completely like Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 is an open world game that's also instanced. However, Guild Wars 2 is much more spacious, okay? So this particular game is a little bit more confined. And if you played sort of like the copycat games, if you played Swordsman Online, if you played Yulgang, maybe Age of Wushu, you might kind of get a feel for the game. It's like, yes, it is sort of open world. It kind of feels like an MMO, but at the same time, it is not going to be as massive or as epic as maybe you might have envisioned with something like World of Warcraft, except with Kung Fu moves. And then let's talk about the Kung Fu. Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. I really do like being able to jump around and do stuff. However, there are copycat games that allow you to do that as well, and even in the case of Yulgang 2, I was able to climb mountains and do more stuff. There's less invisible walls. However, Blade and Soul, I think it's done in good taste, because really the game is focused on this sort of like story-driven experience, and it's really good too. Like, there's a huge amount of cinematics. In fact, most of the footage that you're watching is probably going to be cinematic, and I really like that. It really immerses the player. However, it's also kind of jarring, or it's sort of immersion breaking at the same time whenever you're playing with other players who have the same backstory as you. It can get a little bit confusing. So yeah, there is that. If you are somebody who likes role-playing and kind of really like sitting down and sinking into a game, you might have a love-hate relationship with this game, because when you're playing alone, it definitely feels really, really cool. But whenever you start grouping with other players and the story starts to kind of, I don't know, it gets a little bit flimsy, because of the background and how your character is like the chosen one, sort of ish, and then everyone's the chosen one. You guys know what I'm talking about. So yeah, it gets a little bit awkward with that. But enough of that. Let's talk about the raw mechanics, the gameplay, of course. So the game uses something like a pseudo-tab targeting system. It feels really action-packed. It really does. It's definitely more so than what I imagined it, especially with the trailers and the cinematics. When we watch the trailers, it looks like it's actually going to be standstill almost. It looks like it's going to be like Age of Wushu, where it's almost standstill, but there is some action-y and mobility abilities. But no. It's actually more like World of Warcraft, where it's more floaty. You can pretty much move and do whatever you want, but then you do have some skills that are really impactful, with CC-oriented or movement-oriented. So probably we're going to go along the lines of Guild Wars 2, where it is action-packed, but at the same time, you do have a very physical, visceral abilities that just feel really good, and they're not exactly physics-based, but it gives that illusion of that. So not as floaty as World of Warcraft, but still gives you that mobility, and overall, that works really freaking great with the whole Kung Fu aesthetic. However, what really sucks, to me personally, and it kind of breaks my thinking, I guess, whenever I'm playing the game, is like, like, okay, I'm a kung fu freaking master, and I can jump around and I can like basically fly, or it's really a gliding, and you can do all this crazy kung fu stuff. But whenever you enter combat mode, all of a sudden you can't do certain things. And I don't understand that. Like before, you could actually run and sprint and glide, and then all of a sudden you get in combat and you can't do those things anymore. Right? I don't understand. Why? Why is my mobility magically limited? It just doesn't make much sense, and I think it would be really freaking cool, especially for PvP, if we could still do those kind of things, but you can't. Now, I didn't actually get to play the PvP, which kind of sucks. I really wanted to. I can imagine some really awesome times with this game. I don't know if it's going to be as balanced. I don't know what kind of game modes. I don't know what kind of fun it would be. If it's just arenas, if it's just 1v1, which would kind of make sense. The game kind of almost feels like a fighting game-ish. I think it could really work, maybe in the vein of like Archblade or, you know, something like that, one of those online brawlers. But again, tragically, I did not get to do the PvP. In fact, I didn't go very far at all. Now, I did play as the Summoner, and I thought this was the most unique class in the game. There's not many games that really allow you to have a true summoning experience. Like, the closest, or the first that we had, was Final Fantasy XI's Summoner, and then I guess you could kind of say, like, the Hunters, or the Warlocks in World of Warcraft, but not really. Mainly the Necromancer, the Warlock, had, like, a big ability. Now, when I think of summoning, I think of, like, summoning a giant monster, and in some of the cinematics and trailers for Blade and Soul, we were led to believe that we would have that, but right now, in the beginning, you just kind of have a companion pet, and he just does a single ability. I don't know how that's going to evolve later on. However, it's not like you're going to have like a whole huge slew of abilities like old Guild Wars 2. You guys remember that? Like in Guild Wars 2, whenever you first started the game, you'd have like a bajillion abilities instantaneously. Now they definitely funded it down, and Blade and Soul is the same way. You're going to be learning your abilities gradually, and for your kung fu abilities, you know, like your whole like air walking and teleportation and jumping and shit, like you learn that gradually as well, and it's kind of tied into the story, and I actually really like that. I like that they do that. Before in like, you know, copycat games, it's not done as like viscerally or as interestingly, but for a reason, I can see why those games were copying Blade and Soul. Blade and Soul is absolutely a very high quality game. For free-to-play, it looks really good. And remember, guys, this is actually an older game. You know, it was brought back, it was like hyped up back when like Mortal Online was being announced, Terra was being announced, and it's still, like right now, it looks really good. You have to remember, it actually has a really interesting art style. It's not exactly realistic, it's not exactly cartoon or anime, but it is anime inspired, but at the same time, it's not going for a chibi anime look. It's not even going for just a full-on cartoon anime look. It's trying to bring anime to real life, and that's why everything is a little bit, you know, weird and shapely, and it's just kind of really characteristic, I think. It's got a lot of character, and I really like the art style, especially if you do look at the actual art. If you look at the loading screens, the concept art, you can see how that really bled into the game and made it what it is. Yeah, there was a little bit of controversy, I think, like, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago, about the over-sexualization of the characters, but the truth is, that's for men and women. I don't think it's sexist, it's just sexy, you know? That's just how it is. And it looks really good. However, keep in mind, guys, that some of these classes can only be used with certain races, and I do believe that some races are gender-locked. I think there is one that's female only. But also, some of the classes are tied in with the races, okay? So depending on how you feel about that, could be a negative, could be a positive, depending on how you like to be immersed in roleplay. But as a first impressions, one thing that I really like to look at in MMOs, or pretty much in any game that has characters, classes, what have you, is how like different they are from each other. And in Blade and Soul, it actually seems pretty different. Now, I don't think it's like any class gets like a super duper like kung fu boost. Like if you play as the ninja, it's not like you're going to be able to, I don't know, like glide fast, super duper faster, and you're not going to be able to double jump or triple jump all over the place. It's not like you're going to be extremely like significantly more mobile like we would see in Guild Wars 2. It's more of the fact that your combat abilities are oriented, you know, toward that class. So everybody has the same base, like, traversal mechanics. These are the kung fu, you know, wushu kind of stuff, you know, where you can, like, glide and jump and fly. And you know, guys, you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, so every class has that. So don't worry about that. You can play as, like, the Destroyer or whatever. You can play as the big tanky character and then still be pretty freaking mobile. It's just whenever you get into the combat mode, that's when things change. Okay, so if you play the Summoner, you're kind of played as like a long-range mage, you have a lot of CC, and you have your pet kind of helping you out, and I really like that. You don't have to stand still, you know, for any class. Every class is mobile, but all these classes are differentiated from their combat status, okay? Now, in some games, like Final Fantasy XIV, different classes play differently, not just in combat, but also outside of combat, before combat. You know, there's like some preparation depending on the classes. In this game, it's a little bit different. So they do play differently differently. You know, the classes are unique and interesting, especially with the lore and world setting behind it, because it is a Kung Fu game with Kung Fu classes. However, if I had to rate it based on uniquity and differences, I honestly can say that Guild Wars 2 definitely beats it. It's got way more unique, I guess you can even say, lore, world building, and between the different classes, they're definitely far more unique. But I guess I could say I'm interested in the Kung Fu Master for a class and the Summoner. Those seem to be the most unique in this game. However, I think Black Desert is definitely gonna beat it. Yeah, have you guys seen the Summoner or the Beast Tamer for that game? Yeah. Okay, so anyways, I don't really know. This is a first impression with a whole lot of guesstimation in it, guys, okay? But you see the gameplay. I played through the tutorial. I think it's a really cinematic game, but then again, I want to reiterate real quick, guys. I think it's a cool action-based game, but then again, it really feels almost like an online action RPG. It doesn't really have the MMO aesthetic or feeling that I had whenever I play World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2. I don't really have that feeling playing this game. So let's end the video by nitpicking on some things. Like I said before, with the invisible walls and instancing, there is one thing that I guess it's a little bit better than the Elder Scrolls Online, right? Okay, Elder Scrolls Online, whenever you enter a building, there is a load screen. In Blade and Soul, there is a similar kind of mechanic. However, you don't just black out. You don't black out into a load screen. You just can't see players on the outside, and you have to reload it. So there's like a small stuttering, but you don't black out and go to a load screen and then reload the map. It's done a little bit better. The transition is significantly better, but it is there. Okay, so constantly, as you are playing, you're going to be made aware that you are playing in tons and tons of instances. It's not fully open world. And then, of course, with the immersion breaking of your story, interacting with other players, and just overall, yeah, mechanically, the game is completely solid, I think, and it looks gorgeous. But, you know, as an MMO, it's hard to say that it's a great MMO. It's probably a good game, but, you know, for people who really freaking love MMOs, the social aspects and the interaction with different players, you know, Albion Online, EVE Online, RuneScape, these games where you really interact with other players. I don't know how it's really going to work in Blade and Soul right now, but at the beginning, I'm not really feeling it. Still, I'm not saying it's a bad game. It's just, you know, social aspect, MMOs. It's kind of why we play MMOs, and I'm just not feeling it with that. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm Skyline Shore with Free MMO Station. This is just my rant video, my first impressions of Blade and Soul. Look forward to the beta coming October 30th. And we'll see you again next time.